It was daytime, and somewhere on the island, there was a beautiful waterfall. Several men arrived at the area. The long-haired man turned around and told his uncle that they had arrived at the place. His uncle was none other than Jaghu. They were on Mount Ganga in Sichuan. With a smile, the nephew mentioned that it was just as their ancestors had described. The waterfall, the turtle-shaped rock, and further in the distance, one could even see the summit of Mount Ganga. Jaghu approached the water and touched it gently with his finger. He began to observe the water and, with a sincere expression, admitted that since this water came from the melting of perennial snow, it was freezing cold. He stood up and with a cheerful expression asked his men to stay here and his nephew Chen to stay close and follow him carefully. The men nodded their heads, and Chen's eyes widened with joy, making an excited smile appear on his face. Jaghu gained momentum and jumped. Taking small jumps over the water, he began to move towards the waterfall. Chen did not fall behind, and imitating his movements, he started following him closely. A while later, they arrived at the waterfall. Jaghu placed his hand on the stone and peeked out. His eyes began to shine with confidence as he remembered that beyond the turtle-shaped rock, if they climbed up the waterfall along the cliffside, there should be an entrance next to the fist-shaped rock. With a surprised expression, Chen mentioned that this matched perfectly with the records. Both looked at each other and with a smile, they nodded. They found an entrance, and Jaghu decided to go first, asking Chen to follow him. Chen put his hands on his waist and couldn't help but get excited. They entered the cave, which had walls full of herbs. With a serious gaze, Jaghu began to walk carefully, while on the other hand, Chen's jaw dropped as he had never seen a place like this. Using his hand, Jaghu pushed aside the lianas and his eyes widened in surprise, leaving him speechless. They reached the heart of the cave, where there was a hole in the ceiling through which sunlight was illuminating everything. Jaghu put his arms behind his back and mentioned that they had arrived. Chen's attention was fixed on the precious rocks. He would never have thought to see such an impressive view inside this cave. For him, this was mystical. This place was filled with herbs. Jaghu's attention focused on them, realizing that this was the perfect environment for spiritual herbs to thrive. Chen was amazed to see how precious this cave was. Jaghu's eyes widened in surprise, and his attention fixed on a flower-shaped herb. It was the century-old snow ginseng, a spiritual herb that had absorbed extreme yin energy. Chen approached the herb and mentioned that they needed to exchange this snow ginseng for the dark wool flower from the Namgun clan. Jaghu began to observe the precious herb and nodded, explaining that with this, the severe meridians of the Namgun clan's daughter should also improve, and in turn, they would obtain the 200-year-old dark wool flower. Jaghu approached the herb, closed his eyes, and decided that it was time to collect it. He began to extend his hand toward the herb, which was emitting a powerful aura. Just then, a whistle was heard, and this immediately made Jaghu's expression change and his eyes widened in alert. Something that was hidden behind the rocks began to move quickly toward Jaghu. He could not help but clench his teeth tightly, knowing that this was not good. The creature attacked with speed, but luckily, Jaghu stood up and using the fan blocked the attack at the last second. Then the creatures started bouncing against the rocks. Chen panicked and asked if his uncle was okay. The creatures started bouncing against the rocks with speed. Jaghu's eyes filled with fear. He panicked and asked his nephew to be careful since it was moving extremely fast. The creatures tried to attack Jaghu from behind, but he reacted in time, turned around, and blocked the attack again. The tip of his fan froze. His gaze fixed on the fan. He could not help but feel somewhat confused upon seeing frozen Kai. Chen, somewhat worried, approached and asked what was happening and what creature was attacking. Jaghu remained silent, and then with a serene gaze revealed that they were being attacked by a lizard. Upon hearing this, Chen's eyes widened in surprise and confusion. He could not believe that this was true. The blue-colored lizard emerged, ready to attack again. Jaghu told this adventure to Soryong. Our boy's jaw dropped and his eyes widened in surprise, as it was extremely rare to find a blue lizard. The great patriarch could not help but smile, thinking that Soryong was a lover of poisonous creatures. With a serious expression, he mentioned that the lizards were not poisonous, and asked if he was sure that if it was safe. The mouth of our boy watered and his eyes began to shine with joy. With a smile he said that it was fine, revealing that the lizards had poisonous Kai in their eyes. The great patriarch was surprised and despite having no idea what our boy was talking about, he praised him anyway. Jaghu began to show a forced smile, realizing that Soryong was certainly an eccentric. It was night and the sky was beautiful. Jaghu explained that if he received any new information about other toxic creatures, he would let Soryong know immediately. Soryong's eyes began to shine with joy, and he couldn't help but thank him from the bottom of his heart. The next day, the patriarch returned. He was very worried, and the first thing he did was enter the mansion to check if Soryong was okay. Soryong, Hwang, Jughu, and the great patriarch were sitting and having a cup of tea. Seeing that the patriarch had arrived, everyone's attention turned to him, and our boy asked if there was any problem. Cheolson grabbed Soryong by the mouth and head and with a worried expression began to turn his head to see if he had any injuries and asked if he was okay. Hwang stood up, and upon seeing this, she couldn't help but feel somewhat confused. Soryong was just as confused as she was and explained to the patriarch that he was fine. With a smile, he began to show all the snake bites he had on his arms and explained that although he had woken up after 10 days with scars on his arms, at least he was alive. The patriarch's eyes began to shine with rage, and smoke started to emerge from his nose. He was furious to see that the bastards of the blood cult had dared to harm Soryong. Just then, something caught his attention and his eyes filled with surprise. He turned to Hwang and with a furious and worried expression asked if she was okay. Seeing this, Hwang panicked and asked her father to calm down. With a confident smile, she admitted that she was fine, revealing that Soryong and the family members had saved her. The great patriarch coughed and with a smile caught everyone's attention, revealing that Soryong had done something incredible. He revealed that after knocking out the elder, Soryong said that he was his natural enemy. Our boy looked away and couldn't help but feel embarrassed, while on the other hand, a proud smile spread across the patriarch's face. Soryong joined his fingers and, while blushing, with a nervous expression explained that everything had gone well since his plan had worked. The great patriarch joined the conversation, revealing that thanks to that, they had discovered the weakness of the blood cult. Jughu, who was sitting at the table, raised his hand and with a kind smile caught the patriarch's attention by asking how he had been. Seeing that Jughu was also present, the patriarch shook his hand. Since Jughu had risen to a high position, they had not been communicating much, and now they had only met under these circumstances. With a smile, Jughu apologized, explaining that he had been very busy. Soryong and Hwang's attention was fixed on them, making a smile appear on their faces. She adjusted the strand of hair and mentioned that they were childhood friends. Our boy couldn't help but feel stressed, as this was very chaotic. Jughu asked the patriarch to take a seat since they had much to discuss, starting with the blood cult. The patriarch did not refuse but asked Soryong and Hwang to sit as well since they needed to discuss this in more detail. Soryong became nervous but nodded his head, while on the other hand, Hwang began to smile. Everyone sat at the table, and the patriarch asked how the progress of the search for the secret agent was going. Soryong's eyes filled with curiosity. He interrupted the conversation and asked which secret agent they were talking about. He didn't know if by secret agent they were referring to a spy or something similar. The patriarch rested his head on his fist, and his eyes expanded with joy. Then, he closed his eyes and, in a serious tone, asked if Soryong hadn't mentioned that the bastards from the blood cult had interrupted to steal the secret manual of Blood Hand Poison Claw. With a surprised and sincere gaze, our boy explained that for them it was extremely valuable. The patriarch opened his eyes and asked how our boy believed they had discovered that the Blood Hand Poison Claw manual was with the Tang clan of Sichuan. Soryong's eyes widened in fear. He couldn't help but clench his teeth and start sweating. Placing his hands on the table, he stood up and with a furious expression made it clear that this was a big problem since there could be someone inside the clan leaking information to the blood cult. Hwang and the patriarch's attention focused on our boy, leaving them somewhat surprised. The eyes of the patriarch and Jughu filled with confusion. He placed his hand on the patriarch's shoulder and with a smile asked him to educate his son-in-law a little since as a newcomer to the family, he was unaware of certain things, but even so, he was hearing some rather amusing stories. The patriarch began to stroke his mustache and could not help but feel somewhat disappointed. Soryong could not help but sweat upon realizing that he was the odd one out. With a kind smile, Hwang explained to her future fiancé that secret agents could never exist in the Tang clan. Soryong turned somewhat surprised and asked if this was true. With a calm gaze, the patriarch explained that even when selecting a simple servant, they conducted exhaustive background checks on all their direct relatives and even distant relatives. Then, if they considered them acceptable, they incorporated all their direct relatives into the clan. With a confident smile, he made it clear that all their children were raised within the Tang clan, so under such circumstances, no one would dare to betray them. Our boy couldn't help but go into shock upon seeing that they took such extreme measures. He began to sweat, and his eyes widened with curiosity, and then he asked who the secret agent was. Somewhere else, someone broke a teacup. A muscular man grabbed a woman tightly by the neck, making her clench her teeth. She tried to break free, but it was in vain. The man was Ju Young-hak, and his eyes were full of rage. He began to strangle the woman, making her face turn pale. She was a servant of the Murim Alliance. Jug, who showed a finger and, with a confident smile, made it clear that within the alliance, only 3 people had knowledge of this matter, and he was confident that by now, the leader of the alliance should have already captured her. It was daytime, and the sun was high in the sky. While the situation in the clan was stabilizing, an unexpected guest arrived at the gates of Tang Clan Manor. Upon seeing the guest, the guard couldn't help but tremble with fear. The guest mentioned that he had finally arrived, explaining that running all the way from Hebei to Chengdu without using mobility arts had been quite fun. He struck his fist against his chest and, with an excited smile, asked the guard to inform his patriarch that Peng Muan, head of Clan Peng, had arrived. So, friends, this chapter comes to an end. What will happen next? We'll uncover it in the next chapter. Don't forget to rate this chapter out of 10 in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.